Hello, I'm Doris Foster with the Stanislaus County Workforce Development, and thank you everyone for joining us today and taking the time out of your busy schedules. At Workforce Development, we work with businesses to determine what the skill needs are of the demand occupations, and then what we do is we work with skilled labor to help them to strengthen the business's needs as well as contribute to the economic success. We do that with different types of trainings as well as serving our businesses in our local area. And so one of the things that we have really been talking about that you hear all the time here in Stanislaus County is there's a brain drain. People are leaving our community and there's a lot of people commuting out. Well, while we talk about that a lot in our area, I have never been able to put my hands on accurate statistics to prove that belief, whether it was right or it was wrong. And so I had this real desire of trying to understand what's happening in our community. So while we were digging around, we did find a previous study that was completed in 2000, and in 2006 it was updated by San Joaquin Council of Governments. And it exhibited an increasing and diversified talent pool that leaves Stanislaus County and neighboring communities that are commuting to San Francisco, the Bay Area for work. But that study was done 20 years ago. So the Workforce Development Board approved a study to look at what's currently happening in our community. On March 15th, we opened up a request for proposal for a comparison study to the last one that we had seen. And Resource Development Agency, RDA, won the proposal, and we contracted with RDA to conduct the study that you're going to be hearing today. We have been just really enjoying our work with RDA, and just this whole endeavor has been very exciting and eye-opening for all of us. RDA's mission is to strengthen public and nonprofit efforts to promote social and economic justice for vulnerable populations. RDA supports its clients through an integral approach by planning, grant writing, organizational development, and evaluations. So with us today, we have two presenters. We have Amalia Friedman, and Amalia is the Director of Practice and Delivery and has provided oversight of the project. Amalia brings over 2 decades of experience in project and program management for and with government agencies, nonprofit organizations, and private companies. With deep experience in managing multifunctional teams, working across complex organizations. As Senior Director of Practice and Delivery at RDA, she provides strategic direction to RDA engagements with an emphasis on facilitation and strategic planning efforts. Amalia has served on project management capacities in evaluation, strategic planning, organizational development, and grant writing. In domains as various as criminal justice, health service, education, transportation, and high tech. She is accustomed to rapidly changing in technical environments and moving teams and projects forward efficiently. And we also have with us John Cavallo. He is the Human Resource Director and has been the Commuter Study Project Director. John brings more than 10 years of professional experience working on local government, nonprofit, and community-based settings with a focus on system change through collaboration and innovation. As a practice director of RDA, John manages a robust portfolio of planning, grant writing, evaluation, organizational development, and research projects focused on workforce and economic development, adult education, and social services. John specializes in coordinating stakeholders across systems for more effective service delivery and excels in qualified research, interviewing, and group facilitation, financial analysis, and planning system mapping and data visualization. We are really excited to have worked with you and to finally get to the end of this project. We started this project a while ago and we had hoped to be done sooner, but with COVID, our department just got really busy and we kept kind of putting it off. So we're really excited to hear from both of you. After the presentation, the Workforce Development Board will be able to ask live questions, and guests can write their questions in the chat, and we will make sure to address all those questions. So on that, I will turn it over to both of you.
Thank you, Doris, and thank you for the kind introduction. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, so everyone can see that first slide. Great. So before I get started, I just want to say thank you all for attending today. We're really excited to present our findings to you all. This has been a long time coming, and it's been a very interesting and insightful project. I want to also thank Doris and her team for just all the support that they've provided us throughout this project and helping us get this over the finish line. Amalia, do you want to say anything before we get started?
Unmute myself. I'm just really pleased to be at this milestone moment. You know, so much of 2020 has been unexpected, but it's also really provided some great ways of looking at this data and some insights that I think that we hope will be useful to the Workforce Development Board and to your variety of stakeholders going forward in thinking about how to address the needs of Stanislaus County and its commuters and its businesses.
Great. So the presentation, it's probably going to take us about 35 minutes. So bear with us. I'm going to start by going over our research objectives, or really our research questions, and then speak briefly about some of the COVID impacts on this study and what it means for the study. And then we'll go into the methodology and then really spend our time in two parts. We'll first talk about the commuter assessment key findings, and then we'll move into the workforce and economic opportunities that we identified. And then we'll end with some next steps. And then we can open it up for questions. So our research questions really focused on two areas. The commuter assessment, where we wanted to know who is commuting out of Stanislaus County to the Bay Area, and what really are the characteristics and patterns and trends that define these people who commute out of county, specifically to the Bay Area. You know, I want to note that we looked at commuters in all directions, including local and out of county, but really one of the focus of this assessment was to really understand more about the Bay Area commuters and looking at how they may have changed over the past 20 years since the first study was done. And then another piece is really understanding what motivates commuters and what motivates their choice to get in the car for 1 to 2 hours per day and head to a job that could be anywhere from 30 to 60 miles away. And what are also the things that would motivate them or prevent them from taking a job locally. And then the second part is to understand what are the concurrent workforce and economic trends that are also important to understanding this commuter population, as well as to developing strategies to either motivate them to take jobs locally or motivate businesses to relocate to Stanislaus County. And then lastly, we looked at what are some of the gaps and opportunities for increasing local employment. So, as Doris stated, we began this project in May 2019, and it was actually slated to be completely finished by really the first quarter of 2020. Data collection went from, I believe it went from late September to December 2019. So it really is a snapshot from the very end of 2019. As we all know, March 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic became a very serious pandemic. The state shut down, and it led to a pretty unprecedented recession across the country and the state. And we saw in Stanislaus County in particular that unemployment rose at a height in April to 15%, which represented about 42,000 jobs lost. We've seen that this recession has kind of impacted industries and occupations in different ways, but really that the ones that don't lend themselves to social distancing, such as service, retail, hospitality, have really been decimated by the recession. And then another factor that kind of separates this recession from past ones is that large swaths of the workforce are working remotely now. And so based on a national study of workers, they estimate that about 40% of workers now are working remote, and that's up from 2% in 2018. So it is quite an increase. And what this means for this commuter study is that when you combine job losses and remote work, it's fair to say that commuters out of Stanislaus County, that the volume has decreased. And it makes you wonder, well, then like, what is this? Why are we looking at this? Why is this study still important? And I think that there's several reasons that actually make this study, that maintain the study's value and actually maybe even increases it a little bit, is that this study reflects data at the very end of a long period of economic expansion in this country. And so we're looking at, so it reflects commuter data and economic data at when we had very high levels of unemployment, where we had increased wages were growing, industries were growing. And so this study captured a high watermark of economic and labor force activity. And this is important as the county and the larger San Joaquin Valley region goes into post-crisis recovery planning and really looks forward to the next 5 to 10 years of having those benchmarks and metrics to look back at and say, well, this is like where we might be able to get back to. But there's other insights that this report could provide in terms of future economic planning. It can help better understand how industries and occupation and employment has changed, as well as help inform adjustments to long-term economic plans and strategies to address the COVID impacts. I think it can also help identify new areas of the economy, specifically industries and labor force, that should be developed given what has changed since the recession hit, especially in terms of when you consider remote workforce and that certain industries and jobs may have gone away for good. And then and that will also help understand what parts of the economy and really like what workers need retraining and employment services. And then lastly, it could also help provide data and insights to attract businesses that may be looking to relocate in a post-COVID world, since, you know, given that their workforce may be remote, that they don't really need to be in these urban economic centers like they were in the pre-COVID times. And so with that said, we also strongly recommend that deeper and more targeted research is conducted to really fully understand these efforts. And it's likely that we'll be trying to understand the impacts of this period in time for many years beyond. And I'm sure that there's going to be quite a few PhD dissertations written about it as well. So with that said, that's really just to kind of set some context and really to address the elephant in the room, that things have changed and we're not in the same world that we were in when this study was conducted. But that this study still can help us move forward and help Stanislaus County plan for its recovery. So our methodology that we took for the study, we employed a mixed method approach, which involved collecting quantitative data through surveys, as well as some qualitative data through surveys, and then interviews and labor market data. For surveys, we sent out paper-based surveys to all county residents, and as well as gave them the option to take the survey online. In total, we received 3,061 eligible responses, and that number actually far exceeds the number that we would need to have a statistically valid sample for a county of Stanislaus's size. And of those 3,000, and we'll get into how they broke down in just a moment, about 60 of them were taken online and 40 were returned to us by mail as paper surveys. For interviews, we conducted 23 interviews with commuters, and these interviews were really to dig into their experience of commuting, as well as the things that motivate them to commute and the things that may facilitate or prevent them from taking a job locally or taking a job out of county. And then we did 3 telephone interviews with employers to really understand how how a local labor force motivates their decisions of where to locate their businesses, and what are other factors that they think about when they're considering a site selection. And then lastly, we looked at just raw labor market data to really understand the local economic trends. And some areas that we specifically looked into were worker replacement needs. We looked to identify difficult to fill positions, occupation and skills gap, and then incumbent worker training needs. And we also just wanted to set some benchmarks of the county's industries, top industries, and occupations in order to compare them against what commuters reported. So for this first part, we're going to talk about the commuter assessment, and this is really going to be covering data that came from the survey itself as well as interviews. This assessment really had 3 areas of focus. We wanted to get a demographic profile of who commuters are. We wanted to understand their commute patterns and characteristics of their commute. And then we wanted to measure their willingness to change jobs and gain some insight into what would need to happen for them to move jobs. The way that the survey respondents broke down was, of the 3,000 and some that we that completed the survey, 38% were local commuters, meaning that they live and work in Stanislaus County. 48% were out-of-county commuters, meaning that they live in Stanislaus County, but they work out of county. And then about 14% either didn't provide us with that information, or we couldn't, if it was a paper survey, we might not have been able to translate or to understand what they wrote. Of out-of-county commuters, more than half, so 53%, work in the Bay Area. And then 47% commute out of county, but they don't go to the Bay Area. And that was predominantly the destination for non-Bay Area commuters was San Joaquin County. And we'll show you a little breakdown of that in a moment. So first, we're going to talk about the Bay Area commuters. So the Bay Area commuters in general are about 2/3 male. About a third of them are 45 to 54 years old and have a household of 4 or more children and children under the age of 18 and possess some college or less. These numbers have changed slightly since 2000. I think that the percentage of males have gone up 5% and the percentage of females have gone down about 5%. And then the household size went from about 3.5 in a household to 4. So there's been some slight changes. One of the more, I think, important points of data that comes out of this demographic profile is that individuals who are commuting to the Bay Area are earning on average $35,000 more than someone who's living and working local. And I think if we are trying to understand ways to motivate people to take a job locally, this $35,000 difference is a big factor and frankly a big barrier to convince people to work locally. And so, I think that as we move forward into thinking about what kinds of recommendations we want to make and what kinds of strategies that can be done to convince more people to work locally, this is something that we have to consider. And there are, what we did find is that people were willing to consider other benefits to move locally because commuters were pretty clear that this commute is very challenging. And we'll get into that in a second. So who is commuting? Where do they work and what kind of occupation do they have? So what we found is that most commuters are working in construction, manufacturing, healthcare, and logistics. This is a bit of a change from 2000, where there was a greater share of people working in professional, scientific, and technical services, and And then I also, and you know, I want to say just from like kind of our perspective going into this is that I was expecting to see a lot more tech in the survey results. And this was kind of a big surprise that it was about 7% of the Bay Area commuters, just because, I mean, tech just seems to be, it has just been really a driver of the economy in the region for the past, I don't know, 10 years. And so, so this was kind of a surprise to us, that construction, that a lot of the tech work commuters have shifted, and it's more construction and manufacturing now. And then some of the occupations that we saw that were most common were people in management roles, people as construction workers, and then office and administration support. I also think that looking at these trends and seeing that there's been a shift from high-tech workers to more like construction, like blue collar types of roles and industries, that this may actually account for why there's been such a shift in, or why there's such a gap in wages between local commuters and Bay Area commuters, just because it might just be that more construction workers have been pushed out of the Bay Area due to the cost of living, that there might be more of a demand for them, driving up wages. But it wasn't something that was part of this study to look at, like how wages are being impacted outside of the region. So that's like one of the questions I think that came out of this study. Looking at all out-of-county commuters, as I mentioned earlier, San Joaquin County is by far the most popular destination of out-of-county commuters, followed by Alameda County and Santa Clara County. One thing to note is that since 2000, in 2000, Alameda County and Santa Clara County were really the destination of most commuters going to the Bay Area. And San Francisco and San Mateo in particular have creeped up a couple percentage points since that study. And you know, I think that is probably likely to folks working in Silicon Valley and San Francisco. It also is probably why commute times may have creeped up a little bit since the 2000 study, like that people are just going much farther than they were in previous years. And then, and so, as we said earlier, 53% of out-of-county commuters travel to one of the Bay Area counties. And then the other point that we wanted to make is almost half of the commuters are coming out of Modesto. And so, you know, that really tells us that most people who are working in the Bay Area are living in the population center. And if we are looking to target people, that gives us a good idea of where folks are located. So when we looked at, one of the things that we wanted to understand is what are some of the characteristics of a commute out of the county? And so first we asked people, how do they commute? And 92%, which is very high, drive alone, which means that a very small percentage, 8% of commuters are, around 8% of commuters are using public transit or carpooling. And just from a traffic perspective, I think that that's something that would probably need to be addressed, given just the volume of what that means for the volume of cars coming out of Stanislaus County. But also, if you remember, all those commuters, a lot of those commuters are living in Modesto. So it's not just them all coming out of the county, it's also them coming out of one area of the county, and what that means for local roads around the population center during commute hours. On average, commuters travel 63 miles and for their commute, and their commute is one way is an hour and 40 minutes, and it costs them around $100 a week. And then another thing that we heard from folks through the interviews is that the commutes are difficult and that they've gotten more challenging over the years as more and more people are on the roads. People talked about the number of accidents that they see going over the Altamont, the number of close calls that they've had with people on their phones or distracted, and just that you know, it's really like, it's not a pleasant drive. It's for some people it seems like it's scary and it's risky, and so and the impacts that probably has on people's stress levels and their mental health is probably significant, and we'll talk about that too in just a moment here. And so we also asked commuters to tell us about the impact that their commute had on their quality of life. And in general, especially for out-of-county commuters, the commute does have a pretty negative impact on their quality of life and their perceived sense of safety. However, when we broke it down, looking at commuters by different categories, so local, out-of-county, and Bay Area, we did see some pretty substantial variation. So only 3% of local commuters reported a negative impact of their commute. Whereas as people start going out of the county, more than a quarter report a negative impact on their commute. And then those driving to the Bay Area, so folks going over 580 or 680, mainly reported negative impact. So more than half of commuters out of Stanislaus County going to the Bay Area, or about half, are reporting some impacts on their quality of life. We asked people to kind of qualify that a little bit for us in the survey. And so the areas that people really saw the greatest impacts were on time, like was in many ways just their time. So time spent with family, time to pursue their own interests, time to sleep, and then also health was another area. But if you look at the chart here, I think one thing that's interesting is the gray bars are for local commuters and the blue bars are out-of-county commuters. And as you can see, the out-of-county commuters, the impacts for whether it's finance, mental health, physical health, time to pursue their own pursuits, sleep, or time with family are all highly impacted. Whereas local commuters, it's a little less, and there's actually a dip when you look at impacts on physical health or pursuing time with family or sleep and mental health. And then finances and time spent with family do creep up, but it's still not as widespread as as it was for out-of-county commuters. So that's just to say that these commutes are difficult. They cause folks a lot of stress, and they do have real-world impacts on residents, including just impacts to their wallets, impacts to their family life, and really impacts to their well-being. And so if there's a way to convince people or to motivate people or to provide people with an opportunity to take local work, I think that there may be an opening to do that because it does not seem like people enjoy these commutes. So the last part of this assessment was we wanted to know, what is it going to take for people to take a job closer to home? And one thing that was surprising, even with this, I mean, I don't know that commuters know what the pay differential is for their job in the Bay Area versus a local job, similar local job, but even with like a pretty wide pay differential, 83% of out-of-county commuters are willing to change jobs to take a job closer to home. And then of that 83%, more than 3/4 said they would take a job closer to home for the same or slightly less than they're currently making. So that does tell us that that it's not just money for people, and that they would be willing to take a job even if it means taking a slight pay cut. And I think that also shows that this commute is that for many of them, that they're probably doing these cost-benefit analysis in their head, and that this commute, the negative impacts of this commute does in some ways outweigh the fiscal benefits. And so some of the things that we asked them would be factors in their willingness to take a job home. The ones that would increase their willingness to take a job closer to home would be comparable benefits that they get with their current employer, having the opportunities to have the same level of professional development, and then having a workplace that embraces diversity and equality was also important. And then factors that are going to make them less likely to take a job closer to home would be if their job depends on a network of clients or some kind of territorial sales area that they've developed. If they're in a specialized niche or field, especially if that doesn't exist locally, we saw that older workers and those that are closer to being vested in their employer-sponsored retirement plan or stock options were less likely. And then another thing that we heard quite a bit in interviews was that one thing folks were concerned about taking a job in Stanislaus County was that they felt that either the employment landscape is less competitive and gonna be almost like a negative impact on their resume. And then this is kind of another thing that was brought up, is that some folks felt that the same job in Stanislaus County compared to one over the hill is actually more susceptible to a recession. And so they felt like staying at a job that's in the Bay Area just has more job security. So just to kind of review what we've heard today is, for the commuter assessment, more than half of the out-of-county commuters are commuting to the Bay Area. That one of the demands for Bay Area commuters now is the construction interview, which is a shift over the past 20 years from a more high-tech worker profile. The pay differential of Bay Area commuters is around $35,000 more than it is for people working locally in Stanislaus County, and that a large majority of out-of-county commuters are willing to take a job closer to home for the same or slightly less than they're currently earning. Okay. So next we're going to talk about workforce and economic opportunities. And this part of the assessment was to identify opportunities that the commuter population can be engaged or leveraged to strengthen local economies and ensure that local businesses and employers have access to the talent and workforce that they need. We looked at ways that commuters do and do not meet the local workforce needs of businesses and industry. And then we also looked at strategies to attract businesses and attract talent to Stanislaus County. So we did this through kind of a tiered process. First, we conducted an industry assessment of out-of-county commuters. We looked at the performance indicators of the industries that out-of-county commuters work in, and we evaluated the proportion of out-of-county transferable skills by industry. And then we identified industries that meet the assessment criteria for potential development. So we were really looking at industries where there's projected growth, where there's historical and projected growth. And then from there, we identified some next steps, which were strategies to attract businesses and workers and provide opportunities for folks to relocate to Stanislaus County. So the industry assessment, we looked at industries of out-of-county commuters across 5 areas. We looked at the 5-year forecasted job demand, 10-year historic employment growth, the 5-year forecasted employment growth, and then the proportion of out-of-county commuters in that industry, and the proportion of transferable skills by occupation for each type of industry. So looking at job demand and growth by industry, over the past 10 years, Stanislaus County has added 31,000 jobs, and about a third of them, actually more than a third, were in the healthcare and social assistance industry. But there was also notable growth in accommodation and food service, construction, logistics, and retail trade. And I don't think, given what we know about Stanislaus County and what we've seen over the past 10 years, that these are that it's surprising that these are kind of the top 5 industries. Healthcare is, it has grown quite a bit in the past 10 years, and we expect that it's going to continue to grow over the next 5 years. And I think that this is an area that for the next, at least for this presentation, that we're going to pay a little bit, we're going to kind of focus a little bit of attention on. In terms of job growth, looking over the next 5 years, the top 5 industries that are projected to create the most jobs in the top 5 years are healthcare and social assistance, finance and insurance, accommodation and food, construction and logistic and warehousing, and then as you can see, there's education, public administration, management, utilities, trade, and manufacturing. And just to remind you all, these industries are the top industries of out-of-county commuters. And so a couple things to note here is it was surprising that finance and insurance has a high job demand, but it actually is not projected. It didn't meet our requirements because of it hasn't really historically grown much over the past 10 years, and the transferable skills aren't as high in that industry. Retail and trade is, even though it's been a top industry in terms of growth, a lot of people were employed in it. It actually was prior to COVID-19 projected to contract, and I would imagine that has only grown since the recession hit. I mean, this fits with a trend of brick and mortar on the decline, and there just being less retail work as online shopping and other forms of commerce have become more popular. And then another one that I think is probably that the numbers are probably need to be adjusted for given the recession is the accommodation and food industry, just given that this is an industry that has struggled and hasn't really been able to continue to function at the same capacity due to not really lending itself to social distancing or remote work. And so I imagine that there's more of a contraction in that industry in terms of job growth. And then healthcare, as you can see, outpaces the other industries by, I mean, nearly like 3 times the next industry of finance. So it's definitely projected to be continuing to be like one of the engines of the local economy over the next 5 years. So we looked at transferable skills, and transferable skills are skills that are considered portable from across industries that are also valuable across industries. So there are things like teamwork, communication, leadership, as well as there's certain kind of technical skills like using, I mean, just working, knowledge of computers, Microsoft, the Microsoft suite. So they can mean a variety of things. And we looked at each of the industries, and through a tool that we used in Jobs EQ, we're able to look at the number of transferable skills based on job postings in each of those industries. And so looking at the industries that of out-of-county commuters, we see that 8 out of the 12 had a 90% or higher transferable skill rate, meaning that workers in most of these industries should be able to switch careers with some training relatively easily. And so, that also is an opportunity. This is important to understand, because if we are looking to either retrain or rehire workers post-recession or encourage workers to take jobs locally, there may be a need for them to either switch occupations or industry in order to do so. But it's important to know that most of the out-of-county commuters are working in industries where they have a high level of transferable skills. So when we considered all these factors together that we just went through, we're estimating that over the next 5 years, there's going to be about 5,000 new jobs created. And across these 5 industries that we really see as promising industries for development that should be really at the center of any strategy to both increase the local workforce, encourage out-of-county commuters to take local jobs, and attract businesses from out of county to relocate to Stanislaus County. And so those industries are healthcare and social assistance, construction, logistics and warehousing, educational services, and professional scientific and technical services. Of the out-of-county commuter industries that we do not feel meet the criteria, or have, and it's not really that they shouldn't be focused on, but it's that they have less opportunity within them, and that some of them may even be contracting. And that's accommodation and food service, manufacturing, retail trade, public administration, utilities, finance, and insurance. So just to review, healthcare and social assistance is expected to create 3,600 new jobs in Stanislaus County. There are 5 industries that are promising industries for development, and they represent probably around 5,000 new jobs over the next 5 years. And that 85% of commuters can be hired across these 5 industries based on transferable skills. Okay, so this is the last piece, and these are recommendations for next steps. And these recommendations are really for the Stanislaus County Workforce Development Board to consider. And while they will likely require many of them require partnerships and working with either other economic or workforce focused agencies or organizations, as well as businesses to employ, they're really directed at the Workforce Development Board to consider. So the first is policy and communication strategies. And the one thing that we think is important is really promoting the strategic positioning of Stanislaus County and the lower cost of living there. I think for both workers and business owners, Stanislaus County is centrally located. All the major highways run through it. It's in proximity to the Bay Area, but it's also close to the capital, Southern California, as well as, it's a hub for the San Joaquin Valley. And the lower cost of living, I think, more so than ever, is an important point to make, as a lot of workers who formerly had to be located in more expensive urban centers are looking to move out of those areas for just a different pace of life or quality of life. And there may be an opportunity to market to those workers. And then another piece is to encourage the CalSavers retirement program. As you recall, folks said that having similar benefits were important to them. And for many small businesses, providing a retirement program is costly, and it requires a certain fiduciary commitment or a match commitment that a small business can't take on. And so the CalSavers program actually provides businesses can enroll in it, and it's kind of a no commitment, there's no match required. It's basically an IRA that's being run by the state that employees can direct employers can direct their employees to, should they want to save for retirement. And it's a good solution for small businesses. The next area is workforce development strategies. And so, so the first piece is just supporting employers to develop strategies to recruit and attract more local talent. And so this is a general strategy that is kind of connected to a lot of the other strategies, but it means that it's engaging the businesses to be actors in attracting local talent and coming up with their own solutions and incentives to convincing people to take jobs more closer to home. the second piece is leveraging existing workforce training and assisted employment programs that provide workers with opportunities in strategic occupations and industries. And I think given that there's likely a lot of people out of work right now looking for work, that these are important things to continue to leverage and continue to promote to get people retrained and back to work. And then the last piece is partnering with community colleges as well as other employment and training organizations and agencies to develop career technical pathways and on-the-job learnings that are really tailored to identified industries and in demand or hard to hire positions and skill sets. And so, particularly in healthcare, there are often positions within a healthcare system that are just difficult to employ, require specialized training, and that both the Workforce Development Board and its partner agencies should really keep an eye to that to see how they could help fill those positions. And then the last piece is more of an employer-focused strategies, and those are so one piece is to educate local employers of using the commuter study data of the number of commuters and talent that they may need that are leaving the community each day for work in other counties. I think it would be helpful and it's important for business owners and industry leaders to know just the number of potential talent that's leaving the county each day, especially businesses that may be having difficulty hiring for certain positions. And then another piece is to encourage local businesses to provide relocation incentives for workers to move to Stanislaus County or take a job in Stanislaus County. This may seem like a stretch, but it can be a common practice in a lot of different types of industries. I know the healthcare industry, especially in rural areas, does it quite often. And so, it is a way to incentivize people to take jobs that may not be in the first, in their first geographic choice, as well as, and it doesn't necessarily need to be just a cash incentive. There's also other types of incentives that have been offered, such as student loan, like student loan assistance and housing assistance. And then the last piece is, employer-focused strategy is to identify businesses that are not in Stanislaus County, but that a lot of county residents work for, and encourage engage these businesses, let them know the data, and encourage them to consider relocating all or part of their businesses in the county. I think that if employers may not know how many people they're employing from Stanislaus County, but there may be a business case to be made to move their business to the community that their workers live in. And so, this is another piece to consider and should be part of any strategy to use this data to engage businesses. And so, thank you all for sitting through that. I know that was quite a lot, and that is our last slide. So I think rather than make some closing comments, I would just like to open it up for questions.
John, that was a great presentation. So board members, if you have any questions, just feel free to unmute. And if you are a guest, we just ask that you just put it in the question answer period, and we will read your questions for you.
Doris, would you like me to unshare my screen?
You're free to do that, or if anybody else wants to go back to a screen, as long as you're willing to fluctuate back and forth, I think we're
okay,
good.
I'll keep it on then.
You must have done such a thorough job that there's not a lot of questions. And it's a lot of information to take in. So we did get a question that asked if the report would be made available online, and the answer is yes. So we are going to forward the presentation to all of the attendees here today. And a PDF of the report can be downloaded from our website, as well as there will be a link for the recording. And a printed version of the report will be made available upon request. And please don't hesitate to ask because we have hundreds of copies. I do have a question. Many of these recommendations have been made. Many of these recommendations have been made and followed through in the past without results. What makes the researchers think it would work this time?
I mean, that's a really good question. And, you know, I think that these recommendations came out of both the data that we collected, as well as recommendations and research that we did on just what the field of workforce and economic development are thinking about in situations like Stanislaus County has itself in. I think that, you know, as someone who works with all kinds of public bodies across the state, it's not always easy to take a plan or to take recommendations off an evaluation report and turn it right away into visible results. And so I do think, you know, some of these are things to consider. Some of these are low-hanging fruit that could be done right away. And some of the recommendations are things that are going to require planning and bringing in all kinds of different stakeholders to do successfully. So I think, you know, the recommendations have some complexity to them that could take time to see results from. Amalia, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I think the key thing is to really, that I realize that there's a feeling that a lot has been done without result. And I think the key element here is how recent is the data, and are these practices mirrored by what is working elsewhere? And so I think that the effort that was made with these recommendations was to really look at what kind of strategies have had traction, and have they had traction in places where the data matches up to Stanislaus County. And I think that's, you know, there's a real opportunity in that. But I agree, I can't pretend it's easy. This is economic development work. Workforce development work is not, it's not always a linear path.
Okay, I have another question. I noticed that you have manufacturing as an industry that does not have potential for development. However, we have several manufacturing plants related to construction. May I ask how this information is obtained and how accurate you feel it is?
Yeah, I mean, most of the information around industries came from two sources. So we asked commuters to identify which industry they worked in, and those industries were based on national industry codes that are used by the Department of Labor. And then we compared that to data that's provided by the Bureau of Labor Statistics through a economic analytics tool that we use, and that actually the Workforce Board also uses. It's and we looked at employment data for those industries as well and compared them. So we were looking from both like a primary data collection source as well as a secondary source, and we're pretty confident in their validity. I think that there are definitely manufacturing case-by-case instances where manufacturing is increasing in the county, and that even starting new plants is a good sign of that. But I think when the DOL provides this data, it's looking both at long-term trends to make their forecasts. And if we just look at the long-term trend of manufacturing in this county, as well as, which also lines up with the trend of manufacturing across the state and the nation, it has declined over the past 20 years.
Next question. In physician recruitment is not just money, but social opportunities such as entertainment, etc. Your study does not address this area.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it does in a way where we asked folks what would be things that they would consider to take a job. And I think that we didn't ask, I have to go back to the survey and look at the questions that we asked, but I think the ones that that we had on the slides, those were the ones that were the most commonly marked by people that we saw as having kind of that came up as being significant responses. And so in our analysis, so I think, people did talk about these things that these are things that did get brought up in write-up answers as well as in interviews, that the social aspect of living in, the Bay Area, in a Bay Area city versus a small town in the Central Valley, that there might be for some people a perceived difference in the social opportunities. Whether that's true or not, I'm not going to comment, but so yes, I think that is a consideration. It's just not something that we were doing a thorough assessment of.
We have one of our board members asking, please identify specifically the actions you perceive as low-hanging fruit.
I think the promoting CalSavers is a low-hanging fruit. It doesn't, the state will work with, the state has resources out there. I think when I was looking at it, they even are offering to provide technical assistance to regions. It doesn't really require much other than enrollment from employers, and it offers workers an opportunity to begin to save for retirement. And so I think that that's one that, could be implemented and doesn't actually require any funds or other resources really on the part of the Workforce Development Board or any other kind of like small business agencies or organizations. So that would be one. Let me just go back. And then I think the employer-focused ones in a way are low-hanging fruit because the Workforce Board has the data and has the findings, and the report is out there. So part of educating local employers on the talent that's leaving the county each day, that work's already done, and I think that can be very easily communicated out there, and it doesn't actually require much work on the part of the Workforce Development Board. So, I do think that some of these, while they seem very complicated, when you think about what it would take to do them, are kind of meet the benchmark of low-hanging fruit.
Do you find a difference between the kinds of jobs people commute to in the Bay Area and the kinds of jobs they commute to for San Joaquin County?
I would have to go back and look at the report for that, but I'm pretty sure that construction and management and administrative support were the occupations that were pretty common across all out-of-county commuters.
We brought business owners into the area, gave them a tour of available properties, discussed the tax and business cost reductions. The owners in the end would not move their business because of the workforce gap. Has this been resolved? And I can even answer this one and you can add whatever, John, but I think the whole premise behind this was to help identify what skill gap there is in our community, but also who's leaving, and then really that would be information that we would be able to share with some of the businesses, in particular with working with some of the economic development agencies across Stanislaus County, and being able to share what resources are out there, and maybe that would help resolve that. And so I don't know if you have anything else to add, John, into that.
No, I think that that's I think that that is a good answer. I think this report is a step in the right direction of resolving those gaps and identifying, really understanding who the talent is and who's, and the county has been a net exporter of talent for quite a long time now. And so I think that this is like the next step, is figuring out how to retain that talent each day and have them take jobs locally.
Next question, with there being only 3,061 respondents, is there any data in this study that captures the approximate numbers of commuters leaving Stanislaus County? The 3,061 is only approximately 3% of the number of jobs that the census reports through QCW and on the map data. Is this report meant to just supplement that type of information?
So, April, this is a sample of the county, so it's statistically valid and is meant to represent represents the county as a whole. And so we did not get the total number of we did not survey the total number of people leaving the county, but we surveyed a sample of those leaving the county. And this is a very common practice with surveying, just given the amount of resources and time it would take to survey every single commuter.
With the increase in remote work, do you anticipate that supercommuting propensity will continue to increase or actually decrease?
So I've done a bit of research around this, and I think that right now there's some surveys that are being done of both workers and business owners, and by various economists and researchers, including there's a pretty nationally known one at Stanford named Nicholas Bloom. And I think that there's I would call it speculation at this point, because we just don't know. And this has only been going on, like, I know it seems like forever, but this has only been going on for what, March, so 7 or 8 months now. And so I think that but I think that the wide speculation is that of that 40% of workers that are working at home, that are like anywhere from a quarter to about a half of them are going to stay remote workers, and that this is going to have noticeable effects both on just the nature of suburbs versus rural areas versus cities. That it's going to have effects on tax revenue, on transit, on the commercial districts of urban areas that really rely on workers coming into city centers each day and spending their money there. I think it could also it could be a boon to places like Modesto, where more people, instead of spending their kind of daily money in San Francisco or Oakland, are actually spending it locally. So I think that there's this is just to say that remote work is probably not going away, and it's probably going to cause a bit of a tectonic shift across a lot of aspects of our life, including commuting.
I have one more. Should we consider trying to attract more remote workers in targeted industry to build talent pool here?
I think it's kind of a both response to that question. I think that there's kind of my safest answer is sort of a wait and see, but I think that it is important to develop the local workforce even if they're working remotely for an employer that's local or an employer that is remotely. I think with remote work, we're going to start to see more of a portable workforce. So I think a lot of people in the county are going to, there's going to be a lot more people in the county who are working not just in jobs in the Bay Area, but might be working in jobs on other side of the country. And so I think that it's kind of important to focus on developing local workers. So they have access to greater opportunities, which, you know, can lead to increased economic outcomes. But then I also think it's important to, you know, also encourage businesses to consider moving to Stanislaus County if they don't need to be in areas where workers are concentrated anymore.
Two of the reasons for commuters to change jobs closer to home cited in the study were employers could ensure a similar level of professional development, and workplace cultivates and embraces diversity and equality. Is there something Stanislaus County can do to encourage positive action in these areas?
Yes, I think that Stanislaus County can do, there's all kinds of, you know, resources and trainings, especially around diversity, equity, and inclusion, that Stanislaus County could provide businesses to support this strategy. Let me just go back to the question real quick. I want to make sure. And then professional development. I mean, I think that there's, yes, that they could help do that, but I also think that that's something that is, that's really kind of a domain of a business. And it's also, I think that's an area that has also changed a lot over the past 7 months as online training and online learning has gotten larger, bigger in popularity. And so like, I do think that, you know, that's one that I don't really have an answer for, but I think that that's an area that's in flux. Amalia, do you have any thoughts on that one? I know you've done work with counties around DEI and professional development.
I mean, I think ultimately it is something where there's a very distinct need in terms of expanding workforce. In terms of the best practices and strategies, I don't have a lot to add to what you've already shared.
So I will end it with a really nice personal testament. We had someone who shared, my husband and I used to commute together to San Mateo County from Turlock. We'd leave at 4:30 and I would drop them off in Redwood City, 10-hour workday for Medi-Cal, then travel to Half Moon Bay, 8-hour workday in planning in HMB City Hall. I'd pick up my husband on the way back and we'd get home around 8:30 p.m. We could afford a house in Turlock, but not in San Mateo. I missed our teens a lot and ended our commute after 5 years when I got a job in Stan County and he retired. I make more here than I did in the Bay Area. And then I'm going to add, and probably better quality of life. So we really appreciate the presentation as well as the report. As we said earlier, we will make that available to anyone who's interested, as well as online. And we really look forward to taking this to the next step. As the Workforce Development Board strives to understand the needs of our business community, this study is also going to help us to develop strategies to augment and diversify economic development and employment opportunities. Understanding what talent resides in Stanislaus County will enable workforce development to market to business for the purpose of establishing or expanding their companies and providing more employment opportunities locally. Having diversified employers in Stanislaus County will provide local employees that may be commuting, as we saw the testimony, or looking for higher skilled jobs, greater opportunity for alternative employment. So we really appreciate the study. We want to take it to that next level. We want to be able to use the information that we have to really share with businesses, and hopefully that will change some of our trajectory. So we meet as a board every quarter. So this will be one of our main topics at our next board meeting. So again, thank you RDA, thank you John and Amalia for all the work that you've done. It's been a long road, but it's been a good road, and we really appreciate you. So, and thank you everyone who's joined us today and participated in the study and in the presentation.